afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode of the California Proprietarian Podcast, abbreviated as CAPropCast. And on this show, we primarily uphold and defend the individual natural right to private property. We believe that that is a right that proceeds from a divine source, from God. It's granted to every individual by God himself, by their divine creator. And we believe that here in the temporal realm, here on earth, the only just means by which it can be revoked is through due process of law. It may not justly or lawfully be arbitrarily revoked by any human entity, including and perhaps especially the state. And so on every episode of this show, we try to discuss a different angle drawn from the popular discourse that has the potential to affect or have implications for people's private property rights. And I also want to add in that we are live streaming once again. That's always a very special occasion for us here at CAPropCast. So, thank you to all of you that might be joining the live stream, and thank you all to everyone who watches it after the fact as well. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Mr. Edward Badalian. He is a former Jan 6 defendant. He was horribly railroaded by our Department of Injustice, by the Biden-Harris regime, and for acting pretty much lawfully and reasonably and peacefully, non-violently. So we brought him on to discuss not only his personal experiences, but his policy recommendations for what can be done to avert this sort of injustice in the future and to address the problems that have been caused to the lives of other people that have been wrapped up in this nonsense. So with that, Edward, thank you so much for joining us. You can give a quick intro of yourself personally, and then after that, as always, we'll dive into the meat of the issue.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Edward Badalian. Obviously, you guys know that now. But I started my activism journey, I guess you could say, in 2017 at Pierce College. I was a libertarian activist for Young Americans for Liberty. My first event I actually went to was a Ben Shapiro event, where that was my first encounter with Antifa, and they were trying to shut it down, but it didn't work. And eventually, I guess, that kind of died down a little bit. I was doing a little bit of work here and there. I went to Leadership Institute classes and stuff, but and I was going to start my own little, college activism group, but that didn't work out. But then, the election of 2020 started coming around, and COVID happened, and so when COVID happened, there started being like other activists started rallies that were in Los Angeles, like the Save Our Children protests and the Beverly Hills Freedom Rally. And so I first started attending those, and really started to brush up against Antifa and Black Bloc and the left, because they would always counter-protest our protests. And eventually it got so heated that, I got into a fight with them on Halloween of 2020. And you can actually find that video on YouTube. It's called Antifa versus Wonder Woman, because one of the activists I was with, she was dressed as Wonder Woman, Lisa Simpson. And so... that was actually that video was retweeted by like Dan Bongino and like James Woods and a couple of other people on Twitter, and a lot of people saw that video, but I guess, I don't know, no one wanted to interview me at that time for some reason. But so basically, then obviously the election happened, and all of us were very, I guess you could say, angry at the injustice that had just taken place. And we had witnessed, from, I guess, early 2020 up to the election, we were waiting for the other shoe to drop with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And that should have disqualified, Biden. He should have been charged for all the corruption that was present in that laptop, the evidence. And he wasn't. And so that was one thing that was definitely on my mind, plus all the stuff that was coming out about the election machines and the multiple ways that they are able to defraud elections. And I started learning about like Tammany Hall, for example, that elections in America actually have been rigged for like over 100 years. So then we started seeing like protests popping up in DC, the Stop the Steal protests, and at the Stop the Steal protests in December, you had Antifa and Proud Boys like fighting each other, and 4 Proud Boys got stabbed. And so we had this idea that we also wanted, like, because Trump announced that there was going to be a speech on January 6th, so we thought, okay, let's try to go to January 6th. Me and my little group of protest buddies from Beverly Hills Freedom Rally. We'll try to go and see Trump, speak at his rally, and then if we get attacked by Antifa, like we have before, we should, be prepared to defend ourselves. And so we came with, we brought defensive weapons to Virginia, Arlington, Virginia, where our Airbnb was, and those weapons never entered D.C. So just to be clear on that, we were very careful on not breaking the law on everything, and still they tried to. They did railroad me and
call you a terrorist and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, that I was the organizer of a terrorist organization, essentially, even though it was just a group of buddies from protesting that, we had no formal training or to, like, there was nothing. Yeah.
So you were terrorists who scrupulously obey laws?
Right.
That seems very strange.
The whole premise of their charging us is insane, because in all the cases, they try to say that we have corrupt intent, that we were trying to stop a lawful thing that was happening.
Projection, it would seem.
Exactly, because really, we were, in every single J6er's mind, all the ones that aren't infiltrators, was to stop a crime. So even if you disagree with like the fact that the election was stolen, you still, our mens rea, as they say, our intent was to stop a crime.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we don't have a corrupt intent. So all the charges that require criminal intent are bogus in all the J6 cases.
And even if you're factually incorrect about something, the First Amendment protects your right to be wrong. To a great extent, as long as you're not defaming someone or defrauding someone, you have a right to be wrong. So under the First Amendment.
Yeah. And that's true, but like a lot of these charges, they're very severe charges. Like in my case, the 1512, the obstruction of official proceeding,
right?
It requires a criminal intent. So like you have to know that what you're doing is illegal,
and be doing it for that purpose.
Right. And in this case, it was the exact opposite. We were trying to stop a crime.
And if I understand correctly, I just want to interject, if I may, for a moment. The Supreme Court, because of its ruling in Fisher versus United States, they threw out most of those charges, right?
Yeah, I was actually just listening to the oral arguments on the way here, because it's funny to watch. It's entertaining to watch the prosecution's arguments fall apart in that way. Because in my case, I don't want to like insult her, because there's still some litigation pending. But like my judge, she was just like she bought everything the prosecution said without even like questioning it. Like,
Amy Berman Jackson.
Amy Berman Jackson.
She's one of the worst. One of the worst federal judges to occupy the bench.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it's crazy because she gave Bill Clinton. She's the one who gave Bill Clinton immunity for the Clinton Sox case when he stole classified documents. So their leftist appointees, they will go ahead and absolve leftist criminals of all their crimes while throwing the book at the other side. And then on our side, we have like conservative justices. They try to be like, reasonable and
as
logical,
objective as they can.
Objective, yeah. And they end up, they're not activists. So we don't have that same sort of like firepower in the legal system as the left has.
Amy Berman Jackson, she's a wholly owned subsidiary of the DNC and of the Obama-Clinton crime machine.
Yeah.
So that's how she functions. She functions as a rubber stamp for that whole clique.
Yes. Yeah. There's no so many of my constitutional rights were violated in that trial. I mean, one of the big ones I would say for sure is the Sixth Amendment, where you're guaranteed there's a compulsory process for the production of witnesses that are in your favor, and the critical moment of my trial really was hinging on what happened when I went inside. So I ended up inside the building for 4 minutes, and then an officer came to the window and said, let everybody evacuate. And I went to that officer as he was helping me down out of the window, and I was like, "I'm sorry, officer. The only reason I jumped in was because of the gas bombs." It's verbatim what I said to him as he was lowering me down, and they knew that. I told the investigators this, and they never produced. They refused to produce that officer as a witness. Mm-hmm. But what they did introduce into trial were officers that had no contact with me at all at the Capitol. like
Yeah.
completely irrelevant. They were talking about the pipe bomb, even though somehow magically they haven't found the pipe bomber until now.
That's very strange. And the other thing about that too, and I've addressed this on the show a few times before, is it's strange how the FBI is having so much trouble identifying them. They don't seem very interested. But also, those fake pipe bombs planted outside the DNC and the RNC headquarters are actually a huge part of the reason why so much of the security detail that was supposed to be present at the Capitol complex was not there, because they were diverted to investigate and potentially defuse those pipe bombs. So as a result, the Capitol security detail were woefully understaffed.
Yes.
Right at a moment when one of the largest protests in the history of D.C., indeed the history of the country, was set to take place.
Yeah, so there was so kind of going back to what I was talking about, the Stop the Steal rallies in December. So we were under the impression that we were going to go see Trump speak during the day, and then at night there would be protests, and then we would have clashes with Antifa. That's what we assumed was going to happen, because that's what was happening in December. But the way it actually played out was like, so I was actually in the crowd that was watching Trump speak, like directly. I was like feet away from him, on the right side of the stage, and I already noticed in that crowd right there that there were people that were not Trump supporters. Like they were wearing like communist themed jackets and stuff, and they look like, you can just tell when someone looks like a leftist Antifa. They're like,
A quick question: the clothes they were wearing, were they black with bright orange letters?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So they were members of the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. Those are Bob Avakian's people.
Okay.
So they're particularly cult-like. It's like a cult-like Maoist communist sect. I've had run-ins with them on college campuses myself. They're particularly rude and loud and aggressive.
Yeah,
So,
they were definitely there. And then so when Trump said, let's peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol, another aside, by the way, like they had a binder this thick of my Telegram messages that they were using as evidence. Not one message said that we were planning to go to the Capitol.
Right.
Not one. Because we weren't. We were planning to go see Trump speak and then maybe fight Antifa at night. Nothing to do with going to the... But it was Trump's idea to, peacefully and patriotically, which is totally fine, go to the Capitol. So we started marching over there, and I started noticing in the crowd, like I got split up from all my group of people because it was just too much. So I was alone. And I started noticing people like dressed in black that were like BLM type looking people, and they were not with the crowd. They were like trying to push their way through to get to the front of the group that was slowly marching. And I tried following them. I lost them in the crowd, but I did end up getting to the front of the crowd. And so I arrived at around like 2:35 p.m. I think. So this is like after the Congress had already been evacuated. So I didn't obstruct the proceeding, which was what I was charged with, but that's another. So I arrive and I could see that there's clashes going on with the police up front. Like this is Lower West Terrace, and all the way up against the building, there's police and there was clashes going on. This so okay. We'll back up a little bit. As I'm approaching the building, I'm looking up and I see like a ocean of people, a sea of people draped against the building, essentially, like walking up, and there's a line of police you could just barely see like over the railing, and they're just standing there. So from that angle, they didn't look like there was any violence.
Right.
But when I went up the staircase and I got to the top of the staircase, then I could see down into the bleachers that were built for the inauguration. And now I was able to see that there was clashes with police, like near the tunnel, for example. But near the windows, there was these guys that were dressed in like black and gray, and they were clearly separate from the crowd. Like they were focusing on breaking the windows, and the crowd was like disgruntled over that. They were like not happy that this was happening. They were like trying to tell them to stop and stuff. But as I walked closer, I got closer to that. I started hearing the crowd chanting Antifa, Antifa, Antifa at these people. And you can actually hear that in the video that was used in my trial, which is my interview on InfoWars, where I was talking about what happened. You can actually find that on YouTube. It's called Edward Badalian Disarms Capitol Window Breaker. So if you type that in you have to type it in exactly, or else you're going to get propaganda that's like against me. But
because the algorithms are rigged against you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. Like there's some leftist at YouTube that's messing with my algorithm because there's desperate people. But yeah, so you can see in that video the crowd is chanting Antifa, Antifa at these people breaking the window, and then I go up to them and I disarm them. So I take them off the window, stop them from breaking the window, and his little group of agitators right there, they assault me. So they like took my hat off, my mask, and they're like shoving me and stuff, and I'm like telling them, I'm like trying to de-escalate because they have weapons and we don't. Because we just came from Trump's speech, so we were not allowed to have weapons.
Yeah.
And these guys do. So they've already been here, and they didn't go see Trump speak.
Yeah.
They're like agitated, and so this is the thing that they used against me in trial, like as if it was like their smoking gun. I'm like, we're not here to break into the building. We're here for the traitors, is what I said.
Yes.
And they try to tie that to a message that I had in Telegram talking about arresting the traitors, which had nothing to do with January 6th. It was a general idea of arresting traitors.
It's just advocacy.
Yeah. And they tied it together and said, see, you went to the Capitol because you personally wanted to arrest the traitors, even though in the context of that Telegram message, I talk about how the police are supposed to arrest the traitors. And then if Antifa tries to stop them, then the police would have us fight back against Antifa to make sure that those arrests happen.
You're talking about like a citizen's arrest or a common law arrest.
Yeah, and with posse comitatus, with the police involved, like not me doing it personally. I didn't have zip ties. I didn't have any weaponry. So where's the, if I was trying to arrest people that day, why didn't I bring stuff to arrest people? It doesn't make sense. The stuff that I had in the Airbnb, which I didn't bring.
Yeah.
So obviously my intent was not to arrest anyone. But anyway, and the reason I said that to those guys, because they're attacking me. They have weapons. I don't. I'm trying to let them know, like, look, if you guys are not Antifa, let's say, we're still on each other's side. Don't kill me.
Yeah.
But stop breaking the window.
Yeah.
You're making us look bad, assuming that you're not on the other side. But it turns out they were, because none of these guys were arrested. But they arrest me.
Of course, yeah.
It's crazy. And they try to say that, they try to use that against me in my bail hearing. They're like, oh, look, see, he was violent against another rioter. Yeah. So he's violent. He shouldn't get bail. They're so petty, they couldn't even give me credit for trying to do the right thing.
And I've come to think that in situations like that, there's a high chance that the individuals that you tussled with there were not just Antifas, but that they were also probably undercover informants.
Yes.
Because there were a number of actual Antifas present at Jan 6 that actually were arrested and charged and prosecuted quite severely, so those ones are probably not informants. But if they're not being arrested and charged for obviously felonious conduct, then it probably means that they were in league to begin with federal handlers who protected them from prosecution. So.
Yeah, that is generally the structure of Antifa. So this actually goes back to the Occupy Wall Street protests. So they'll have their main organizers are feds, like you said, and then they'll have useful idiots that they employ.
Right.
So like if you in Occupy Wall Street, this is when they were like they had super organized. They didn't have too many rabble in their ranks yet. So you had Occupy Wall Street, and they were protesting the banks. It was peaceful protest, but it was overwhelming, and they didn't know what to do. So they sent in their agitators, infiltrators dressed in black bloc. That's when we first saw black bloc show up in America. And they started setting fire to trash cans and breaking windows and of the banks and stuff, the local branches, and that caused the protest to look like it was violent, and which allowed the police to then crack down on everybody.
Right.
And so that's when you got that shot of the people just sitting down on the ground, and the police was like pepper spraying all of them.
Well, yeah, because they'll declare an unlawful assembly.
Right.
So that's what they'll do.
Right. And then those guys, InfoWars actually followed this story and broke a lot of this stuff at that time. But so those agitators, they ran away to I think a hotel nearby, and the police knew where they were, and they didn't arrest them. And those guys never got arrested.
Yeah.
So,
right.
and they arrested peaceful protesters. So that's kind of the modus operandi. The same thing that they used in this case. They had this case they had hundreds of feds. Like that time it was a few dozen of them. But this time there was, I think, over 150 informants that were that came out in various court filings, and maybe probably a few hundred more of their useful idiot people. My opinion, I'm not 100% sure, but Zach Alam, for example, and some of the other people that were dressing And like there's a video like on that same channel that I talked about, the Edward Badalian Disarms Capitol Window Breaker. That same channel is Andrew Jackson is the name of that channel, and they have video of people changing clothes under the tree.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So Zach Alam, he's one of the people that was in the DC pod with us, the J6 pod, and he was arrested, but. There's video of him also going to a backpack and changing his clothes, and he was dressed in all black. He was like right near where Ashley Babbitt died, where John Sullivan was, another Antifa who was charged, but he was hit with like slap on the wrist charges.
Right.
He wasn't. Yeah. And he's admittedly Antifa. He created an organization called Insurrection USA. You can see him admitting all this stuff on the same, again, that channel, Andrew Jackson.
So he's a self-proclaimed insurrectionist.
Yeah.
So.
And he said he wanted to rip Donald Trump out of the White House. That was his stated goal. And
so he's a community organizer, like for Antifa or something. That's usually what they call themselves. Is that sort of what he is?
He appears like he is. But there was something interesting said in the little interview where they had him in that video that I'm talking about on the Andrew Jackson channel, where so the guy talks about his dad. And John Sullivan goes like, "Oh yeah, you know my dad," and they're talking about his dad as if he's like a Fed.
Yeah.
So, and his brother is supposedly a conservative activist. So they have like one conservative activist, one leftist activist, and the dad is a Fed. It's like, little operation they got going there.
It's a two-face.
Yeah, and he got paid $70,000, for his footage of Ashley Babbitt getting shot. But he was right there, dressed in all black, and there's footage of him saying, meeting up with Jade Secker of CNN inside the Capitol building and some other BLM guy, and they're like congratulating each other that they did it and all this stuff. So, definitely some infiltrators, and then like when, in my opinion, the strongest evidence of there being confidential informants and feds in the crowd, agitators, violent. Was Chris Wray, actually, the FBI director, was testimony in Congress and in the Senate. Multiple times he's been asked, I think it was specifically Ted Cruz that asked it in this way. He said, were there confidential informants or FBI assets in the crowd at January 6th that day? And he says, well, I can't answer that question.
Yeah, he refused to comment on that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Well, it's because he knew he was under oath.
Right. And then Ted Cruz goes, okay. Were there FBI agents that were undercover that were violent on January 6th? And he goes, I can't answer that question.
Yeah. And then an interesting question not to be able to answer for the FBI director.
And then Ted Cruz is like, okay, was there FBI agents undercover at January 6th that were violent against the police? And Chris Wray again goes, I can't answer that question. So it's like if you should be able to answer no if it's a no. So
the most egregious example that I can think of what someone who appears at least to obviously be an undercover informant or agitator of some kind is Ray Epps. And but where there's one in a crowd that large or in an operation that large, where there's one, there's likely to be dozens if not hundreds.
No, absolutely,
it's very likely. So
a lot if they're completely like caught in these situations, they'll just say that, it's a normal policy for us to have plainclothes officers in a large protest. Yeah, it's not normal policy for them to be starting the fights and breaking things to shut
also,
down the protest.
Yes, it might be normal operating procedure for them to have undercover plainclothes officers, but these aren't sworn agents or sworn officers. These are just paid informants.
Yeah,
they're not sworn law enforcement.
Yep.
So
at the end of that video of me disarming the guy, InfoWars later in that broadcast, they're able to find a guy who on January 7th, the next day, admitted that he was paid to protest. And this is the guy. So when I'm approaching that window, before I got to it, there was a guy breaking the window with a sledgehammer. And you'll see like a circular crack on the window that was there before I got there. So that guy was actually cracking with a sledgehammer. And that guy was disarmed by other patriots before I got to the window, and they had him hemmed up. They like crowd surfed his sledgehammer away, and they had him held up by his hands and legs as I'm walking down the bleachers, and I walked past that little scene, and I something, I don't know why, I told him, like, put his hat on, because his hat was hanging out of his pocket, and I said, put his hat on. They put his hat on, and it was a beret. And he was wearing gray with like a beige-ish beret, and I'm like, this dude is a French postmodernist, like Antifa, because Antifa wears berets,
They do, yeah. Like, some kind of communist or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like their little communist style. I'm like, this guy is the infiltrator. He's not with us.
It's like a Che Guevara style beret or some
Right.
some crap like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this guy, I guess he was, I don't know. It looks like he's in a government building, like in a basement, and he's admitting. He goes, "Yeah, I had a hard time pulling off the act. I was paid to protest."
Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that guy, he has a podcast, I think, called the Lost Boys podcast. Not affiliated with the Proud Boys.
Yeah, I thought not.
Yeah, but I don't want to say his name, but yeah, you can find him on there. What his actual name is, and he tries to claim that what he said on January 7th, that he was paid to protest and he was caught, and he said it's an organized effort. I can't say who it is. He said all that is, he was just joking.
Oh, yeah, that seems like an interesting thing to joke about right after the fact. But he didn't look like he was being sarcastic either in the video, if I recall correctly. But now, what I kind of want to pivot to, Edward, if I may, is, since for the most part, we've discussed, what happened on January 6th from your perspective, as you saw it in your own words, could you tell us a little bit about, what happened afterward, if you're willing, like with regard to your arrest, when you were charged, when you were, held in pretrial detention, when you were sentenced, this, that, and the other? Could we go into that a little bit if you're okay with it?
Yeah, for sure. So, on the way back, I did an interview with InfoWars, and because I thought nothing I had done was illegal.
Right.
So I was totally open with speaking out.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to hide. And so I did that, and I got back home, and there was nothing going on really. I wasn't contacted by the FBI or anything at that point. But it turns out the person I traveled with, I guess, had done a lot worse stuff. Apparently, I don't know, allegedly, and so he was I guess, trying to lay low, but I didn't know that at that time.
He didn't tell you?
No, yeah, he didn't. He told me a completely different story than what they charged him with. I don't know if what they're saying is even true. They're probably exaggerating too. So
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he. So I had some indication that maybe they would be coming after me, but I just thought they wouldn't come after me because I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm fine. And so, but then all of a sudden, on April Fool's Day, April 1st of 2021, they raided me with a search warrant, though, but I didn't have an arrest warrant for me yet. But it had 6 SWAT team guys with AR-15s dressed in forest camo in an apartment building.
Okay.
They look ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I opened the door at 3 a.m. They raided me. Edward Badalian, come to the door. And I think they had a drone in my patio too, so it sounded like a drone. And I'm like, okay, guys, I'm right here. And I opened the door, and they had the 6 ARs pointed at me and at my face. And I'm like holding my hands up, and they're like, do you have any weapons? Turn around. Put your hands behind your back. And so I'm like, I don't know what to do. They're yelling multiple commands at me all at the same time. So I'm just going like this, basically. And they grabbed me and they shoved me against the stucco of the hallway, and I scratched my elbow in my face. But I wasn't resisting. I was just standing there. And then they cuffed me and they brought me to near the dumpsters. And they double cuffed me. So I guess one of the SWAT team guys cuffed me again with another cuff, and it was like separating the tendon of my thumb, and I had neuropathy for months after that in my thumb, and it was really tight. And it's 3 a.m. I'm like, guys, you're cuffing me way too tight. I don't want to scream right now because I'm in pain because it's 3 a.m. All these people are going to wake up.
Right.
Okay, please take it off. One of the cuffs off, and then I hear the SWAT team from behind me. He goes, I'll let you know when I care.
Yeah.
And then actually one of the FBI guys comes over, who was, I guess, I don't know, trying to play good cop maybe or something, but he took off one of the cuffs, and I'm like, thank you. And he sat me down, and I'm looking up with my hands behind my back. I'm looking up, and there's 6 SWAT team guys standing around me.
Yeah.
And I'm looking, I'm like, which one of you is the one that said you don't care? And I'm looking at him, and they're all calm except for one in the corner. And he's shaking with his rifle like this, looking at me. And I'm like, you're probably the one that said it, huh? You're the one that said you don't care. I'm like, that's really good that you're in a position of public security and you don't care.
Yeah.
Because that vibe to me was they know I'm a J6er, obviously, patriot. These guys are probably all patriots, back to blue. And there's one guy saying that, he doesn't care about a person.
I wouldn't call any of them patriots if they're doing that. They're just tyrants. They're feudal retainers for a tyrannical ruling class, and they're scum.
Yes,
scum of the earth.
Overall, yeah. But this guy especially was, and so I basically like shamed him in front of the others, and he had no response after that. But yeah, then they questioned me for like several hours, and I was able to dispel a lot of their BS, like because they said that my co-defendant used the taser on a cop, that Michael Fanone, you know, the one that was on CNN acting.
Right.
That saying things that as if things were much worse than they really were, because most of the Patriots were trying to help him get back to the line. They weren't really trying to hurt him and beat him and take off his clothes. Like he exaggerated. But so allegedly my co-defendant tased him with a taser that we brought, but it was not true. And I showed them that the taser that we had brought, which was an Airbnb that never even made it to the Capitol, was like a thin blue one. Mm-hmm. And they were alleging that he had a black one that was like wide, so it was completely different. So they weren't able to use that against me or him or Kayla, whose taser it actually was. Mm-hmm. Again, not used on anybody, so it's legal. It wasn't brought to DC, you know, and so that I was able to tell them, and I was able to tell them, like, look, we were trying to stop a crime. We weren't committing any crimes in our mind, so there's no intent to commit any crimes, and I was being reasonable with them. So they didn't I had guns in the house, and they didn't take it away. They just told me later on that I have to sell them. So but they didn't confiscate. They took my computer, and they still have my computer to this day, and they never presented any evidence that came from the computer, because there was nothing on there. So that it's just like they just steal your stuff.
Yeah, so they're still holding stolen property.
Basically, yeah. My paintball gun, and they presented the paintball gun in the court, like he brings it out of the evidence bag, the FBI agent, and he's like holding it up in the air, like completely irrelevant. It wasn't brought to the Capitol. It was not used on anybody, and they're presenting it as evidence. They did that with so many instances. But yeah, so that was the raid in April, and then in August they finally charged me. And they charged me with conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. So it was a conspiracy to do a 1512. And then they separately charged me with obstruction of justice. And then
obstruction of justice. Wow, that's rich.
I know, it's like the irony. But and then also 1752, which is a entering and remaining on a restricted grounds. Mm-hmm.
Trespassing.
Yeah, but it's like federal trespassing,
right?
Though. Yeah. So. At first, the plea deal that they were offering me was to take off just the obstruction of justice, and I have to plead guilty to 2 felonies and a misdemeanor. So I was like, that's not a deal. And she wasn't even willing the prosecutor wasn't willing to tell me like how much time she would have recommended. She's like, oh yeah, don't worry, it's not an empty promise, you know, if you plead guilty. Like,
yeah,
okay, yes, it is probably. And so I said, screw it, I'm going to trial, you know. And so I went to trial, and I ended up beating that charge, the obstruction of justice charge. I ended up beating it in trial anyway. Mm-hmm. And so it came out to the same thing as if I had pled guilty, but at least I kept my right to appeal.
Right.
Because I went to trial. And so, I mean, do you want me to go into the details of what happened at the trial?
Well, when I had Kaylin on a couple months ago, she did a pretty good job laying all that out, and we've already discussed how Judge Amy Berman Jackson, is a scumbag. She's a tyrant. She's a wine mom tyrant. A Karen tyrant, and she's a wholly owned subsidiary of the DNC and the Clinton Obama crime machine. So we know all about her, and then we also mentioned earlier, I think, that the Supreme Court in Fisher versus United States, they ruled that the obstruction of an official proceeding charge leveled against you was unlawfully and unconstitutionally applied. But can you tell us a little bit about what your time being incarcerated was like, if you're willing?
Yeah. So when sentencing came around, so like 3 times the judge wanted to repeat the same thing over and over. So she started off by saying, I found you guilty, and so I'm going to sentence you for this, this, and this. And then, like, she made me stand up, mm-hmm. and then repeated a similar diatribe again. And then, like, a few minutes later, she's like, come to the stand. And so me and my lawyer went to the stand, and she started repeating the same stuff, but now even more like detailed. And she was, I guess, going to give the amount of time at the end of that sort of her speech. And I just couldn't take it anymore, because at one point she goes, "So you were threatening against Bill Gates and Nancy Pelosi. You were to want to arrest her and all this, and then your messages started. You were starting to have violent messages against the police." And I'm like, "Hold on, Your Honor, that's not true."
Yeah, lies. That's defamation.
Yeah, what you're saying is not true. I did not have any messages that were violent towards the police. And then she goes to my lawyer, "Mr. Helfand, should I shut him up? Or are you going to shut him up, or should I?"
Yeah.
And he didn't say anything because he knew I was right. He didn't even try to stop me. And I'm like, no, look, Your Honor, what you're saying is not true. I'm like very calmly explaining to her.
Incorrect, yeah.
Yeah, I did get frustrated with the police at the Capitol, and I flipped them off. Whoa.
Yeah.
But I had no messages that were threatening or violence against the police, and she just kept screaming at me. She's like, oh yeah, go ahead, fine, you talk. I'm not gonna talk. You talk. Go ahead. Like, she's completely hysterical, dramatic scene.
Well, she's a hysterical wine mom,
yeah,
and a Karen, so that's to be expected.
But she didn't hold me in contempt or anything, which tells me that at that time at the stand, I have the right to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just being tyrannical for no reason. But then, and my lawyer, prior to us going up to the stand, he had written on a piece of paper 51. Like he was anticipating that I was going to get 51 months, and sure enough, she sentenced me to 51 months.
Yeah.
Plus all these crazy ass conditions, like I can't go to D.C. I have to stay away from Gavin Newsom and Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Like ridiculous.
As though you had plans of trying to hang out with them.
Yeah, it's stupid. And $2,000 fine, 100 hours of community service, and and then, but I guess maybe she was gonna let me self-surrender, but she didn't, because I argued with her. So she remanded me straight from the courtroom, to jail.
Just sadism.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all it is.
And so I ended up at the DC jail in the quarantine, because they use COVID as an excuse to abuse people even more. Yeah, and violate their rights. And so in the quarantine, it's like max security, 23 hours inside the cell, and with electronic doors, and that was very dehumanizing. But I was in there with a guy that, like a skinny white dude, the kid basically. He was 21 or something, and he had a charge from a warrant from a crime he had committed as a minor, which he had forgotten about. He didn't know that he had it. And then he went with his parents to his dad's birthday, and they went for a tour in the White House. Oh. And the Secret Service ran his name, and apparently he had this warrant, and they arrested him in front of his family, and they threw him in jail. This poor guy. And so they put me as a cellie with him. And the DC jail was assuming that J6ers are supposed to have protective custody and keeping us away from the other inmates, which is stupid. Because we get along with everybody. So I went to the DC jail, and the other inmates were thanking me. They were from their cells, screaming out of the food slots. That's how we communicated. Yeah. And they're like, "Yo, bro, you J6ers, bro. Ever since you guys came here, stuff has changed. They improved all the conditions." Because what had happened was, for the first 2 years, because I fought my case from outside because I got bail. Yeah. So I hadn't. A lot of the guys were in there from 2021. Right.
They were denied bond.
Exactly. And so they were in there being tortured, 23-1 that whole time because of the stupid COVID excuse. And by the time I got there, that they had changed that because, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and I think
Lauren Boebert,
they came and they came to the jail and they inspected it. And then the U.S. Marshals came 2 times and they inspected it. And then so they started improving the conditions. So what they had was so in 8 days I was in quarantine. I noticed, that was when I first noticed that everybody, the majority of inmates are conservative, they're more friendly towards patriots. They don't like gay marriage and trans stuff, and they're religious and they're family oriented. So they're not Republicans will often talk about like, oh, Democrats are trying to give felons the right to vote, but they don't realize if they did that, the majority of felons would vote Republican. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting spin.
Yeah, and especially after Trump did the First Step Act, the criminal justice reform, they know that, and they're like, I think it was Kodak Black, I think one of the rappers that Trump let out of prison, and a couple of others, and so they like Trump, like and so, but then after 8 days they put me to the J6 pod, which is like a separate cell block just for J6ers in the DC jail because they're supposed to be in protective custody, like separated from the other inmates, which is stupid, but yeah. And so in there, I had no idea about the drama that exists in the J6 community. I thought, I was going to go in there, like, yeah, we're all brothers and this and that, we're patriots. But no, apparently there's a divide, mostly centered around this dude named Jake Lang, who is a total grifter, and he raises money in the name of all the J6ers and their stories, which he lies about, and then keeps most of the money for himself. So, one of his biggest lies is that he claims to have rendered aid to Roseanne Boylan.
Yes.
So people think Ashley Babbitt was the only person that died on J6, but actually no, there was 4 people. There was Ashley Babbitt, Roseanne Boylan was beaten to death by the cops, and then there was 2 guys as well, but I forget their names. I should memorize their names, but
they had heart attacks from the stress, right?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, and so it was really patriots that were killed on that day, and people don't talk about it. Ashley Babbitt was just one that was in the news, so that's what most people know. But
she was gunned down just in front of everybody,
unarmed,
blatantly.
Yeah, unarmed Air Force veteran, like truest patriot there could be, just for trespassing. Antifa like violently assaults cops, like freaking blinds them with lasers, throws explosives at them,
bricks,
like beats them down, and they've never once been shot by a cop during a protest. Never once were cops ever allowed to have live ammunition at an Antifa riot. Interesting. But yeah, so they shot her dead, but then Roseanne Boylan was beaten to death in front of the tunnel, like actually kind of near where I was at the Lower West Terrace, and Jake Lang claims to have rendered aid to her. So he actually pays journalists to write articles. So he paid the Epic Times journalist to write a positive article about him, supposedly that, and there's text messages where we saw that he was paying journalists. So that's not a lie. And he says that he rendered aid to Roseanne Boylan, but then we actually reviewed the body cam footage of the cops in front of the tunnel, and you can see where Jake Lang is, and he reaches towards Roseanne Boylan's body, and then a guy named Justin Winchell, Justin Blue, swats Jake's hand away, and he never makes contact with her ever. So it's a total lie. And we actually have him admitting this on video, which I'll release that eventually soon. But yeah, so that's one of the grifters and he says all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, so he told people that he runs a ministry, and like, we're all these J6ers in the pod are his flock. Like, he's our leader, self-proclaimed leader, even though he's actually like not welcome in the Bible study because he says this kind of stuff. And the Bible study is actually ran by like middle-aged or older, like senior men who are, well versed in the Bible, and they're like wise guys, like Matthew Kroll, for example. But Jake is claiming that he's the one who's like the spiritual leader.
So he's a massive self-aggrandizer.
He's a dude, like
self-aggrandizer.
I've met a lot of people in my life. I've never met someone that was so sociopathic. Like, it's crazy. Like, he'll look you in the eyes and lie, like, with no problems. Like, one of the things he said in the beginning, I was like trying to be a peacemaker between everyone hates him, and then him, and I was trying to be a peacemaker. I'm like, okay, like, because I didn't know how bad he was, and so he was confiding in me, and we were having a conversation about leadership. I'm like, dude, like a leader is supposed to be elected, by his peers. He's supposed to lead by example, and they look up to him as a leader, like, and it's by the people's choice who the leader is. And he goes, no, I'm like, I was giving the example of Jesus, and he's like, no, a leader is supposed to be like a warlord that like goes in there and he takes out everybody, and then he's like the leader. Like, so wait, you're preaching you're supposedly preaching Christianity, and then at the same time you see yourself as a warlord. That's
that's more Islamic than Christian.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Obviously we know everyone out there, don't donate to Jake Lang. Stay away from him. Just try to avoid him, because obviously that's probably not going to go to anything good. It's kind of like how the leadership of the NRA routinely takes donors and members' dues and money that they donate to fight for the cause of gun rights, and they use it to live a life of luxury. So this is like the J6 version of that. So just stay away from the guy. Can you give us some information on some people that people who are concerned for the welfare of J6ers can donate to, who might actually help? And
so
trying to do the right thing.
So some of the most legit people are, like, obviously is Ashley Babbitt's mother, Mickey Withoff. She was actually at my trial, and she helped out Kaylin when she was in D.C. She was lost. She didn't know where to turn, and Mickey took her in, along with Nicole Reffitt. They're very legit. So if you could donate to them, I'm pretty sure they have GoFundMe, GiveSendGoes. So if you can donate to them, that would be amazing. And there's
they probably don't have a GoFundMe. So
GoFundMe
Give
left us. GiveSendGo.
That's right.
And there's something called the Patriot Mail Project, which is Paula Calloway. She has a site where patriots can go in and find the different J6ers in different jails, quickly, and send them mail, which is like a lifeblood for our morale.
Care packages.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the DC jail allowed stuff like that, but most federal prisons don't.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of limits. Yeah.
But you can send books. You can send books, commissary money, and letters.
Yeah.
And letters are like amazing. Like they keep us going. And you can put.
And what I'll be sure to do when this is all over, I'll get information from you on how, like, direct links on how to donate to these people and their organizations. And when I post this video on my personal Rumble, I will include all the links in the description box below it for anyone who sees it to click and be able to donate directly.
Yeah, so there's this Patriot Mail Project, and then there's also Condemned USA.
Mm-hmm.
So that's run by Trennis Evans and Jen Baker.
Okay.
And they handle a lot of, like, other services, or like if someone needs to find a good lawyer, or they basically if you want to have, like, for example, like, a lot of J6s wrote articles that were then put on Gateway Pundit.
Oh, good. Okay.
So then, and that would plug their GiveSendGo specifically. Doesn't go to, like, a centralized fund like Cynthia Hughes or Jake Lang,
right,
where they steal most of the money.
Yeah.
These are, like, directly going to the J6ers. So that's so Condemned USA helps facilitate a lot of that kind of work. They're like a central hub for J6ers to contact for information and help.
Excellent.
So if you can help them out, they only work on donations. So please do that. Condemned USA, Patriot Mail Project.
Do they accept cryptocurrency, all of these organizations, for those who might want to donate with crypto?
Possibly.
Okay.
I actually don't know, but we should figure that out for sure.
I was just curious. We can figure that out later, and then I can specify that in the description box, like I mentioned before, so I can specify, if people can send Bitcoin or Monero or something like that.
Okay, nice.
So,
and then there's We Are Good Men. That's like what I work with,
mm-hmm.
And we have a podcast, the We Are Good Men podcast. But on the website, wearegoodmen.com, you can find all the GiveSendGos of the various J6ers listed. And we actually did a podcast, started it out of the jail. So there was people had evidence laptops, because some of the people were still fighting their cases. So the discovery's on a laptop, and it has a camera on it that wasn't disabled. And so we got permission from the COs, and that they allowed us to record podcasts. So we were able to interview. I think we did 14 episodes total while in jail, and then me and my buddy John Mellis, we were moved to our other prison, so we weren't able to continue it, but we're now continuing it on the outside. We just recorded an episode with Jen Baker of Condemned USA, which will be coming out soon. But yeah, it's cool. It's going to be a podcast. It's a podcast basically all the J6ers and people around us that have helped us, that are involved in the community. They are all very intelligent people. There's some, like, geniuses, basically, like Jeff Sable, for example. He was a geoengineer, and he worked for the military doing explosive ordnance removal with ground penetrating radar. So we had a very
dangerous work. Yeah,
we had a very interesting conversation about that. Reed Christensen, who's like this old man who I mean, when I saw him in the pod, it made me so angry. Like that the government went after this guy. Like he's an old, like nicest guy ever.
Yeah,
and
being treated like a terrorist.
It's
or
sickening, man.
Yeah,
it's pissed me off so much. And he has a great book called "Save the Kid," where he talks about America as if it's in the context of a kid. Like, you know, if a kid was about to get hit by a bus, wouldn't you like sacrifice yourself to try to save the kid? So that's kind of that's the idea of his book. It's a great book. You know, Matthew Kroll, who's the real spiritual leader of the pod. He's
excellent
genius on Christianity,
quasi pastor kind of, you know, so unofficial pastor.
And then you have David Dempsey, who he's like the comedian. He does a great Trump impression. He's hilarious.
Real quick, I have a story about him. You know, and it has to do with something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned long before Jan 6, you got in a fight with Antifa in Beverly Hills.
Yes.
David Dempsey, and you know, I'm hesitant to give exact details, you know, because I don't want him to get in any more, you know, spurious or ridiculous trouble, you know, more than he's already in, of course. But on August 14th of 2020, I was at an anti-lockdown protest in Tujunga, and you know, long story short, there's kind of a long story to it. Me and some of the people on our side, the anti-lockdown right-wing pro-Trump side, you know, me and some Proud Boys as well, we got into a street brawl with Antifa, and I tussled with one of them. In defense of another person, because he was about to punch somebody, I pepper sprayed another one.
Nice.
Yeah, and then a big burly Antifa. He was, you know, the only one that wasn't like, you know, kind of like he was one of only two that wasn't like a vegetable soy boy or whatever, skinny, pasty white vegetable soy boy. He came at me from the side and knocked me to the ground.
Yeah.
And you know, so I was walking funny for a few days after that. He was a former football player. His name's Eric Boyd.
Okay.
He's a longtime communist Antifa agitator, you know, and he's been arrested and charged, you know, multiple times. I know he was charged in 2008, but I think the charges were ultimately dropped for lack of evidence. But he was charged in 2008 with lewd and lascivious conduct with a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So I guess they didn't have enough evidence to proceed, so it had to be dropped. But he was charged with that. So again, not saying he's guilty, because obviously he has to be presumed innocent. But you know, that is what he was charged with. So take, you know, that information as you will. I
know that definitely was the case with Chad Loader, where he was charged with that charge as well in 2013.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's interesting. That's like if there's so many pedophiles on the left, it's crazy. Like,
it's a recurring pattern.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, like 2 out of the 3 people he shot were pedophiles. Yeah.
Well, Joseph Rosenbaum was a convicted child molester, and Anthony Huber was a domestic abuser. He went to prison for severely beating his girlfriend, from what I understand.
Okay.
And then Gage Grosskreutz is a communist agitator, you know, and community organizer, as they called him.
Yeah.
But anyway, just to tie up what I was saying real quick, David Dempsey, I will say he took proactive measures to protect me from Eric Boyd.
Yeah.
And David Dempsey and the other Proud Boys saved my life, because I would have been stomped and beaten to death by Antifa if it wasn't for those guys. So shout out to all the Proud Boys. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you to David Dempsey in particular. David, I know you're going through a real bad time right now. I hope this reaches you one way or another. But I know you were sentenced to a lengthy term of imprisonment, but I truly believe it's the deep conviction within my bones that events are going to happen, profound events in this country over the next few years, that it's going to be really bad, really tumultuous. There's going to be a lot of hardship, both on the outside and for you in prison, obviously. But I do believe that at the end of that, you'll be set free, and you'll be set free well before your sentence has elapsed. I do believe that. So just please stay strong, and please keep up that good fight. And but before we finish off, Edward, before we wrap up, I just need to ask you, what would you ask that President Trump do once he's back in office to help either Jan 6ers that have already been released, or even more urgently to help those that are still incarcerated or still suffering direct legal consequences? What would you ask him to do?
Well, so I know for sure in the works right now is efforts to get the pardon paperwork in front of him.
Good.
So David, you're gonna be pardoned. I think when he comes out, he's in LA, so I'll be able to get him, like, let him make sure he you can interview him too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'd be my honor and pleasure. And I'd like to thank him personally. So
Right.
for everything he's been through,
Yeah, man,
both as it pertains to me and as it pertains to his other activism.
Yes.
So, but he saved my life.
For sure. So we're going to get that paperwork in front of Trump so that as soon as he's inaugurated, day one, he can just sign it and get everybody out as soon as possible. But what we always talk about, we always joke about, but hopefully it becomes reality, is that he has like some kind of get together or event at Mar-a-Lago, and we can all go.
Yeah, and
that would be like amazing and beautiful.
A banquet or a barbecue or something.
That'll be perfect. So please, we can hopefully we can make that happen. But and also there's this idea of like reparations, I guess.
Yes.
I'm not sure how that would play out. But as a president, obviously he's going to have a lot of power.
These tyrannical federal prosecutors, they should have to pay out of their own pockets. Like, hopefully not taxpayer-funded reparations, but they should have to pay out of their own pockets.
It would be incredible if he goes all the way with, firing the corrupt people in the DOJ, putting in real patriots.
Project 2025.
And they can go ahead and sue these leftist prosecutors who will be out on the street.
Yep.
Because, they got a lot of money to go after us, like millions and millions of dollars they were funded. So that money should actually come back to the, because it's not for me, as my family went in debt fighting for my case, and there's this is the case for all the J6ers. They've spent the ones that didn't have public defenders, but they've spent thousands, hundreds of thousands trying to fight for their cases.
Right, financially ruined.
Yeah, they try to financially, and in some cases, like for example, dudes would get money from their Gifts and Go early on. This is why I didn't have a Gifts and Go early on, because what they would do is, let's say you raised $27,000, the judge would see that and they would fine them $27,000 at sentencing. It's
that's right.
Inhumane. It's sick, psychotic.
Yeah, it's cruel and unusual punishment.
Absolutely.
So. And it's also preventing them from, mounting a forceful, vociferous defense, which is also another violation of their constitutional rights. But, apparently J6ers don't have constitutional rights. So
yeah, no, it's a total. It's funny, in my trial, she even said, she goes, in order to not, so you don't feel like you were railroaded, I'm going to let you speak or whatever, this and that. But she still railroaded me.
She's just going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Well, because she's a Karen wine mom. She's she's a postmenopausal petty tyrant. So this is what postmenopausal petty tyrant wine mom Karen women do.
Right.
When they're in a position of power, because she sees you as part of the patriarchy.
Right.
So she's going to strike back at the patriarchy with the artificial power she's been given.
That group is the most loyal voting base for the Democrats. Just substituting, just easily manipulated by emotion.
Because women are more they're more prone to socialization. So it doesn't mean they're stupider, because their average intelligence is the same as men, but they are more prone to socialization. So if they perceive that the prevailing culture or the powers that be are a certain way, they are, obviously not in every case, but they are more likely to want to go along with that, because it gives them a sense of security.
Yeah.
So, and they want to seek security. So,
that I mean, do you want? I'm not sure how long your podcast is. Like, I can talk for like a long time.
We should probably wrap up in a couple minutes, but
okay.
But if it's a quick point, we could probably squeeze it in.
No, I was just gonna say about abortion. That's like one of the big things that the left relies on.
It is. Although they mostly use that, not with Amy Berman Jackson is an older lady, but they mostly use that directed toward younger women, single women.
It's the way I see it is like, okay, at least admit that it's a life and you're ending a life,
right?
And then we can have an honest debate about whether you should have the power to end the life or not.
Yeah, but they try to dance around that.
Yeah, it's a parasite. It's just a clump of cells, and none of those arguments make any sense. But they're manipulated by emotion. So the final thoughts, I guess. You guys should check out our podcast. We Are Good Men.
Yes, and I'd love to come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be my honor and pleasure.
Yeah, we can definitely, because
we'll work that out.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and I guess we're going to do another episode on Friday.
Yeah,
and so we'll take up a lot of, like, we can talk about the culture war stuff, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now that is, you can see how obviously you're a believer.
Yeah.
So like Revelations, it seems to be playing out. Pretty accurately.
I think certain components of it have been, and we could talk about the details, because obviously we might not agree on every single detail of that, but I think broadly speaking you're probably correct.
Yeah.
But with that, Edward, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for persevering through all of these trials. I've never been through trials like that. So thank you for gracing us by coming on and giving your version of events, because they tried to silence you. People in power tried to silence your perspective and your version of events, and the least we could do is hear all sides out.
Yeah.
And let everybody tell their side of the story, and so that I think is the main function of what we're doing here, as well as to elicit more help and support for other people, that other Jan 6ers that perhaps are trapped in even worse circumstances than you are.
Yes, absolutely.
But they, the vast majority of Jan 6 defendants, they deserve our help and our sympathy. Vast majority of them are good, decent, normal people that didn't mean any harm. So let's do what we can to help them out. And thank you again for coming on, Edward, for your courage, your boldness in the face of adversity and hardship. And with that, also thank you so much to everyone who joined us on the live stream, and for everyone who watches this after the fact. And we look forward so much to the next episode of CAPropCast. And until next time, God bless all of you, and Sic Semper Tyrannis.
Oh, amen, brother.
Sic Semper Tyrannis.